It kills me that takes like this are ruining all the work that people have done over the past 2 years. I just saw this post and we're going to address it because this is important. If you believe in voting, I'm definitely not going to tell you not to, but I absolutely cannot stand the metaphor voting is a bus, and it's not about getting exactly to your stop, it's about getting on whichever bus gets you closer to your destination. Because one bus is going east, the other is going west, and I need to go north. Neither option gets me closer. They both just take me in different wrong directions. The bus metaphor would work if we had ranked choice voting in more than two parties, but currently we've got fascists on the right and Republicans on the left. Progressives are not represented even slightly by either major party. Biden will put meaningless band-aids on a bunch of bullet holes, and that will feel like a victory considering that Trump would just stick his finger in the hole, but nothing would actually improve. It will just deteriorate at an insignificantly slower rate. But our problems like COVID-19, like climate change, have deadlines that cannot be compromised on. If we miss them by 10 minutes or by 50, the consequences are the same. If you feel compelled to vote for whoever gets Trump out of office, I get that. I really do. And I think you should definitely do what feels right for you. But do not shame, deride, or blame other folks for voting third party or abstaining entirely because they know for a fact the material conditions of their life will not improve and will likely worsen either way. It kills me that takes like this are ruining all the work that people have done over the past 2 years. Or not ruining, but like actively working against, right? These guys aren't really significant, but I get the sentiment because I'm angry. I'm also angry that Joe Biden won. I'm convinced by harm reduction arguments to vote for Joe Biden. In this stream, we're going to go beyond harm reduction. We're going to make the argument that Joe Biden is a material benefit to all of the people that we are fighting for. Or at least like the vast majority of people that we claim to be fighting for are benefited by a Joe Biden presidency, at least to some extent, to a significant extent. All right. So let's start by granting the nitpick of the metaphor. All right. Let's grant the premise. I disagree with the premise that Joe Biden is not a bus in at least some semblance of the right direction. In many senses, he is a step back. He is the regular trajectory backwards in many senses, but he is also the step in the right direction in many senses as well. Let's grant that premise, okay? I want to take a bus north. North is what Bernie would have been. Slightly less north, northwest, would have been what Warren would have been. Joe Biden is a bus west. Trump takes me to the South Pole. Even granting the premise that Biden doesn't take us north, we're not going to get north if we continue our trajectory south. Biden takes us west, or a little less south, at the absolute worst of that argument, right? So this idea that Biden takes us west and Trump takes us east is a really disgusting attempt by people who claim to be leftists, who claim to agree with my ideals and my vision for the future, saying, we are going to intentionally downplay the damage that Trump does to our movement in order to justify our scorched earth voting ideology. I'm sorry, that is indefensible. All right? I am not interested in shaming or guilting voters either. That's not a controversial opinion in my view. Maybe there are neoliberals out there who think that, shaming Bernie or Busters or whatever is a particularly effective electoral tactic, and obviously I disagree with that. So what they're doing is they're taking a bunch of terrible arguments against voting for Biden, and at the very end saying like, hey, if you want to vote for Biden, that's up to you, but don't shame people who don't want to vote for Biden. I am angry because the arguments are bad. I'm angry because the arguments are bad and are going to cause material harm to people who genuinely stand to either gain from a Biden presidency or lose an immense amount from a Trump presidency. Let's get to the actual arguments, all right? So the idea that Biden moves west and Trump moves east and we want to get north, okay? First off, we already addressed the ridiculousness of the argument that Biden and Trump are even the same trajectory relative to north. even if Biden is not movement forward, Trump is movement so far backward that we should vote against Trump either way. Okay, so that argument's there. But let's now actually address the pretty ridiculous notion in and of itself that Biden is not in any sense movement forward, or that he insignificantly reduces harm, their words, not mine. Both of which are brain dead arguments. I'm sorry, they're god-awful arguments. So let's take the harm reduction argument. Insignificant harm reduction. Preventing Naomi Rao from sitting on the Supreme Court is not insignificant harm reduction. And like, I cannot believe that you run a public page and did not put a little bit more thought. Did not put that 15th second of thought into your political theory. If you think that the left does not suffer significant relative material harm from someone like that being on the Supreme Court, or maybe you don't know who Naomi Rao is, maybe you don't know what the Supreme Court actually is, maybe you actually maybe this is partly my fault, because I retweeted someone saying that Ruth Bader Ginsburg isn't actually all that great, and it led people to think that it means that Ginsburg is the equivalent of a neo-fascist. Maybe that's on me as well. But holy cow, to say that Biden is insignificantly reducing harm is to not comprehend the importance of the American judiciary. It's to fail to comprehend, and this will be the next thing that we address, is climate change. Failed to comprehend how climate change works. Because the next argument it makes is that climate change has a deadline, and it doesn't matter whether we miss it by 10% or 50%. That is incredibly, incredibly fallacious. If we had taken the level of climate action that we have today 15 years ago, there are people who would be alive today who aren't because of climate change. There are people who would have homes today who don't because of climate change. This is not an all or nothing fight. And to say that just because Biden's plan does not get us to the level of change we need in time does not mean that there aren't going to be people who suffer directly as a result of him not getting elected president. That's I know that was like a quadruple negative. I hope that that was clear enough, but there are going to be people who are going to lose their homes if Trump gets reelected because of climate change. Even if in both scenarios we get to the right level of action, the damage done to the environment is ongoing and has consequences. It is a lot like COVID-19. We don't see the consequences until a couple decades later. And the earth will survive, but homes will be destroyed. People will die. Water will be contaminated. Air will be polluted. It won't kill the world. Getting back in the Paris Accord is going to save lives. I don't care how you feel about electoralism. This is not up for debate. And I'm not a climate scientist, but I'm pretty sure that Trump will advance that deadline. Right now our deadline is 2050? We have to get comprehensive climate action. Our current trajectory can only last until 2050. Trump will bring that deadline forward with massive inaction and deregulation on the environment. And then he will take the consequences of that deregulation and use it to promote an eco-fascist agenda. Climate migration is going to be a thing in the next 20, 30 years. Do you want somebody who's going to have a remotely humane approach to the refugees trying to escape climate catastrophe? Or do you want someone who's going to use those refugees as a means for pushing another white ethno-state? Seriously. Think about the thing you claim to believe in. I'm not shaming individual voters for how they for how they vote. I'm very, very, very particular about that. If only because A, it doesn't work, and B, you don't know what somebody individually is going through. But if you're going to give garbage arguments against it, if you're going to give the worst possible arguments against it, And honestly, from the perspective of the left, there are no good logical arguments against voting for Biden. It may be interesting to look at it from a super leftist perspective, from the leftist in my social circles. I'm not interested in having this discussion individually with people because there is so much emotion that goes into these arguments. And listen, I'm sorry. If you're a lefty, I love you, and I have so much solidarity for you, and I get it. Like, Bernie Sanders was a once in a lifetime opportunity to effect a level of change that does not exist in any of the other candidates presented, including Warren. I totally get the anger. Like, I'm angry too. I'm angry that there's a Hindu nationalist in Biden's senior advisor circle, and he was director of Asian American outreach. And when he was protested, he was not required. The campaign did not make him disavow Hindutva. They did not make him disavow the Hindu right. They removed him as head of API outreach and put him in another senior role in the campaign. Like, I care immensely about foreign policy, and I care immensely about criminal justice reform, and it sickens me to have to vote for Joe Biden, right? Like, because there are aspects of his political profile, his policy platform, and just kind of how he conducts politics that I find absolutely abhorrent, and I think are a massive leaving the door ajar for creeping fascism. And I hate that I have to vote for him, but I do. I absolutely do. Like, it's if I want to use my vote in a way that does the most good possible, I've got to vote for Joe Biden. There's no argument about it. I'm sorry. Like, and if you have an individual trauma that prevents you from voting for Joe Biden, whether, you're a survivor of sexual assault, and despite what I think about the allegations, like the Tara Reade allegations, and what I think a lot of people have come to understand about the Tara Reade allegations, like, if you are somebody who is, if you are someone who errs on the side of believing the allegations, I'm not going to judge you. If you're someone who quite simply can't vote for him because of all of the sexual misconduct stuff surrounding him, and that is traumatic for you, like, I'm not going to judge you, of course. And if you're a victim of the criminal justice system, and you're like, I don't think that he's a massive architect of it, but at the best, he has positioned himself to seem like it, and optically he seems like an architect of the prison industrial complex because he did write that crime bill, right? And of course I don't judge you for that. But from a material standpoint, if you apply the material analysis, there is no good reason not to vote for Joe Biden if you care about accomplishing good. They seem to think that adhering to harm reduction arguments all of the time is just telling people to wait for justice. And although I agree with you that, wait, hold on. Not voting for harm reduction is the definition of telling people to wait for justice. You're saying that you cannot have a little bit of justice now because we want to achieve more justice in 10, 20 years. That is ultimately what people who argue against harm reduction voting are doing. They're saying no justice now, only the full Monty the next election cycle around. You're telling people to wait for justice, and I am speaking specifically to privileged white middle-class left voters, many of whom are refusing to vote for Biden. I'm sorry, if you fall in that group, I have no sympathy for you. As a college-educated leftist, thank God, like, most of my college-educated leftist friends are voting for Joe Biden, and I'm glad they are, because you're the one group, the white men, specifically men. Sorry, the white cis men, middle class, college educated leftists. That seems like a hyper specific group, but that covers a whole lot of ground in the left. Guess what? You have no excuse. You have no morally defensible reason not to vote for Joe Biden. I'm sorry. And although I agree with you that not voting for a position that is closer to their position is a little self-defeating, they see no other way to challenge the system, which in my view is pretty effed up, than to either refuse to vote or vote third party. I totally understand that. I totally get that. Of course I get that. It's really frustrating and it feels like you have no power. But voting third party isn't going to gain you power. It's not going to gain you significant power. I find it to be morally neutral in California or New York, where there's no chance of Biden losing, and you kind of want Biden to have. And I agree with the argument that if Biden wins and a percentage of the blue states vote third party, that's better than if all of those people voted for Biden. That the mandate should include an asterisk that it's only a mandate if you actually move a little bit to the left. I understand that argument in solid blue states, but the level of political good that does is so negligible and so insignificant. There is no argument that if you live anywhere outside of California, New York, or Washington State, maybe, I don't know what the next solid blue, maybe in New England generally, right? Unless you live in one of those states, like, it's the equivalent of, like, if voting for Biden is like field dressing a bullet wound and maybe putting a tourniquet on it or whatever, and the real Band-Aid is voting third party. That is the truly insignificant decision. So, yeah, of course I get I totally understand that, and I feel that anger too, and that is why I support primarying every except for Ed Markey. We love Ed Markey, and we hate Joe Kennedy III. But other than Ed Markey, I support primarying every single Democrat from the left. In fact, I support primarying Ed Markey from the left. But Joe Kennedy is an AstroTurf candidate. He is funded by big donors, and he is very much a corporate Democrat, posing as like this, squad progressive in order to primary one of the most progressive senators in the Democratic establishment. The whole vote blue no matter who movement, in a way, enables the Democratic establishment to be politically able to put up any candidate for election with a presumption that their base will fall in line. No, they don't presume their base will fall in line. They don't care what the base does. Democrats don't care what the left does. They have never cared what the left does. It is more important to Democrats to beat the left than to beat Trump, because a very decent portion of Democrats don't actually care about political agendas. They care about keeping jobs. This is how any politics in any field will work. Ultimately, the structures of the faction and party that exist, not just in terms of politics, but any organization, people are going to most people are going to act in a way that allows them to keep their jobs. Democratic careerists don't want to lose their jobs to Bernie-crats. They don't want to lose their jobs to the likes of of Fez Shakir and Nina Turner and Waleed Shahid, and Shahid Buttar, right? Sorry, I pivoted on Shahid, but they don't want to lose their jobs to the people that will be employed by the squad, to the people that will be employed by Bernie. So they will work to defeat progressives out of pure self-interest, out of pure career self-interest. They gain more from making sure that we don't vote in elections than making sure they beat Trump. They don't care about getting us to vote against Trump. There are plenty of Democrats who do care about beating Trump. I'm not going to pretend that they don't. But there are enough Democrats to affect a serious power structure who genuinely do not care about us being involved in the system. And they would rather we not vote for Trump and Trump win re-election than the prospect of us, of the Democrats needing our help to beat Trump. That's the truth. They care more about defeating progressives than they do about gaining power for Democrats in terms of presidential or government power. Because if Trump gets reelected, they continue fundraising. By they, I'm going to be very, very specific. I'm talking, I call it the Rahm Emanuel brand of Democrat. And that includes Nancy Pelosi, whose entire political brand is about positioning people to the right of her so that she can seem to be progressive. Same with Chuck Schumer. Schumer especially went hard on Amy McGrath. It's not because he's a conservative Democrat. It's because he wants conservative Democrats in the party to make him look like a progressive in order to lighten the load of what it is he has to do to maintain favor with his base come 2022. Same with Pelosi. She loves having people to the right of her so that she doesn't have to do anything and she can pretend that she's a progressive. She can call a performative vote on Medicare for all that she knows is going to die in the House, but she has to know it's going to die in the House, because if it passes the House, then suddenly she's in trouble and she's got to start campaigning. The point there is you do more for getting Democrats to listen to the left by telling them that we are a voter bloc, to be reckoned with, and that we are a voter bloc that will be lost if Democrats don't play ball. That is more important, and we will be lost on local elections and state elections, and that we will primary them when the time comes. That's the most important part, is primary Democrats. If you're angry at the Democratic Party, God knows I am, primary Democrats. That's what you should be doing. You should be fueling all of your energy into local and state races. Okay, the presumption that their base will fall in line, which I can see becoming a problem because it is an obstacle to progressive movements. Again, I think leaning to the left should vote. I think people leaning to the left should vote for Biden, but this is also something they believe. Yeah, I get that it's something they believe, but it is just bunk political theory. Democrats don't care what you do. I'm sorry, they don't care what I do. They gave up on trying to get my vote, and I don't think they want my vote. Like I just said, they want me to not be involved in the political system. They want people who actually care about progressive voices not to listen to me. By base, I meant anyone who votes blue, should have clarified. Oh, yeah. I mean, anyone who votes blue is going to vote blue, right? The Democrats do see me as somebody who is not worth getting their vote, but yes, I show up to vote Democrat because I understand the threat that Republicans show to our democracy. And I understand that refusing to vote for Democrats isn't going to do anything. It just won't. I'm sorry. It just doesn't do anything. No one listens to me because I refuse to vote. And now we're going to talk about anti-electoralism, okay? Because, God, that post started with the phrase, if you believe in voting. That is a stupid phrase. If you believe, voting is not something you believe in. There are valid anti-electoralist arguments in that, of course, voting alone is not going to solve our problems, and organizing and direct action are important. They're both important. But direct action only manifests in change really at the ballot box. Direct action is supposed to galvanize public opinion, and public opinion drives elections. You can institute individual corporate reforms, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for legislation. If you want legislation, you've got to put people in power. Protest and demonstrate. Those are things that actually get public opinion to move to the left. It gets attention on the problems that have gone neglected for decades, for centuries. But that public opinion has to be harnessed at the ballot box. That's the only way we get systemic change. That's the only way we get legislative change. Unless your endgame is violent revolution, guess what? That doesn't work out too well for us because government has a monopoly on power. We gave it to them. But now we're going to get to the notion that Biden does not represent a significant movement forward. Let's start by going to each of his policies. I am someone who considers themselves to be pretty Medicare for all or bust in terms of what my final policy is. I will not accept any end game that does not include either a single payer or a European-style mutuality-based multi-payer system, which is more radical than Medicare for all. I will continue to hammer that point in. Multi-payer systems in Europe are more radical than Medicare for all. Medicare for all is more viable in the US because it works within a free market. That does not mean that I'm going to throw anything that creates the structures for achieving Medicare for all under the bus. Joe Biden's plan caps your healthcare costs at 8.5% of your annual income. Is that enough? Hell no. Hell no. I don't think that's even your discretionary income. But it's an improvement on the current system. Of course it is. That is a material benefit to a lot of middle class people at the very worst, right? Plus, if you are in the bottom of the middle class or in the working class, your healthcare is going to get massive cost reductions to the point where if you make, Let's look it up for YouTube. If you earn at or below the federal poverty level, which is $12,760 a year, you will be responsible for 0% of all your covered healthcare costs. If you make between the federal poverty level of $12,760 a year and 138% of that, which is about $17,600 a year, you will still pay $0 in premiums. But you will be expected to contribute about 6% of your total healthcare costs annually, up to a maximum of $2,000 out of pocket. So let's say you make $15,000 a year. The most you will be expected to contribute in an absolute disaster scenario, let's say you incur $200,000 in healthcare costs, you may have to contribute around 15% of your annual income in out-of-pocket healthcare costs, presuming you have to get like a heart transplant. Under our current system, in many states, you could be earning at the federal poverty level, be covered by your employer, and still face a $60,000 bill for a heart replacement. Under Biden's plan, your out-of-pocket costs will be capped at $2,000. No matter what. Doesn't matter if that heart costs $60,000, if it costs $200,000, if it costs $500,000. At the end of the day, your out-of-pocket costs will be at maximum $2,000. Is that a lot of money? Of course it is. Of course it is, especially if you make $15,000 a year. But that amount of money, that amount of debt is way easier to pay off than the $70,000 that your hospital stay is going to incur you. And under Biden's public option, there's not going to be this ridiculous practice of denial of coverage at every given turn because the public option is not operating at a profit motive. If they say they cover a service, they will cover a service. If you make between 138 and 150% of the poverty level, so $17,600 to $19,000, you will be expected to pay a maximum of 2% of your annual income. That is the most you will pay at $19,000. At $19,000, the most you will pay annually is about $380 in total premium. $380. Your total out-of-pocket cost will still be capped at $2,000 a year. So $2,380 a year is your total out-of-pocket cost. Your maximum deductible is $250. Again, like, I don't like this. It's Biden's worst policy, worst domestic policy. But there is a massive benefit to these families who are currently incurring five-figure medical debt. Five-figure medical debt. That gets capped to low four figures. And that's presuming that you reach the limit. Which, strictly speaking, on average, the average American incurs about $10,000 in healthcare costs a year, between covered costs and uncovered costs and denied costs. The total value of healthcare services purchased by the average American is about $10,000 per year, which means that on average, your out-of-pocket costs are going to be about $600 per year. The higher end of that spectrum, your costs are going to be capped at $2,000. Anything beneath that spectrum, your costs are not going to go up. It is a massive benefit to working families. If you make between 150% and 200% of the federal poverty level, again, your premiums are going to go way down. So at 200%, you're making $25,000 a year. You're paying a maximum of $1,000 a year in healthcare premiums, which is way less, way less than your current maximum of $2,500 per year. You're saving $1,500 a year on healthcare premiums. And again, you're getting your total out-of-pocket costs capped at $2,500. We still have to do stuff about denial of coverage, but having a public option that is not going to peddle in that is going to be a huge benefit. And there are crucial critiques that we need to make of, the public option is not going to have as big a network as it should, especially in rural states. That people are still going to have to choose between the hospital that's in their network and the hospital that's geographically closest to them. Those are all really important discussions to have, and we can have those discussions. But there is a significant portion of the population that is going to save huge amounts of money as a result of Biden's healthcare plan. Don't take your eye off the ball. This is movement forward. It's not movement forward as fast as we want, of course. And we will continue to campaign against Biden. We will continue to mobilize against him. We will continue to push every element of the Democratic Party as far to the left as we can. And we should. We absolutely should. But if you make up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which is about, as an individual, about $51,000 a year. If you make up to $51,000 a year as an individual, as a single person, you are going to be saving a pretty massive amount on healthcare premiums alone. If you make more than that, you're still saving 1.3 to 1.4% of your annual income on healthcare premiums alone. And then you're saving beyond that on the out-of-pocket limits that are going to be imposed by BidenCare. Everyone is saving money except for the people paying for the plan. You cannot deny this is movement forward. BidenCare is movement forward. There are so many people left behind on it. We got to keep fighting for them. But don't throw all of the working class people under the bus. Don't throw the people working at the poverty line under the bus who are consistently being denied coverage. So listen, Biden's healthcare plan is one of his worst domestic policies. But if you want more people to have affordable access to healthcare, the choice is crystal clear. I said it 2 weeks ago. I'll say it again. I want people to have access to healthcare. That's my reasoning. That's why I supported Bernie. There's a clear choice. Get people healthcare. Get the poorest among us healthcare. And we'll work on the next bracket. Part of the reason that the alt-right keeps winning is that they know how to accept incremental wins and build on them. That's not to say that incrementalism is enough for us. But take the win. We're getting more people access to healthcare. And we're getting it specifically because Biden supports the public option, in part because we are pushing him on Medicare for all. He has to give us something. He could very easily have said we need to restore the Affordable Care Act. Trump made that possible for him. He could have run on restoring the Affordable Care Act. If not for the left saying we need a Medicare for all single-payer system. Because of that, the crux of his plan is a public option. Do you think if not for Bernie's 2016 campaign that Biden would support a $15 an hour minimum wage right now? And that is exactly what he does. One of the centerpieces of Biden's platform is a $15 an hour minimum wage. You probably didn't know that if you were saying that you weren't going to vote for Biden. He supports $15 an hour. He has for the past 2 years. It seems to be one of his most consistent policy positions. Everything else he's shifted a little to the left on, including the public option. He supports some form of the Green New Deal. It's not enough because we also have to offset other countries that aren't going to play ball like China. And the same way that we can't say, well, China's not acting equitably, which means that we shouldn't have to go over our requirements in order to meet them. You have to do the same at the ballot box. Yes, the way that Democrats act is appalling. The way that the Democratic Party acts is appalling. The way that Biden acts and the way that he presents a lot of his policies is appalling. But you can't just say that because Democrats act a certain way that you are absolved of responsibility for doing the most social good that you can. That argument doesn't hold up. The same way that we have to account for the fact that China is not going to act in the best interest of the world, we have to account for the fact that not everyone is going to act in the best interest of the country, and we have to act in the best interest of the country accordingly, even if it means making a decision that we feel is unfairly placed on us. I think people should focus on incremental change right now, especially with Ruth Bader Ginsburg nearing the end of her term. Once, if Biden is done office, we can go harder on reform. Of course, you're 100% right. Biden is of course he's a Band-Aid, but he is a valid Band-Aid that protects left power in the place of which Trump completely eviscerates it. Trump is a hemorrhage, Biden is a tourniquet. So, let's talk Biden's student loan repayment plan, okay? This is not my ideal plan. I like Bernie's plan better. I like Warren's plan better. It is way better than his healthcare plan. His healthcare plan is the worst domestic policy he has. It is still a step in the right direction. Let's talk student loan repayment. Biden's plan calls for borrower... I'm trying to argue for Biden, and Forbes is not making it easy for me by comparing Biden to Trump. This plan is not comparable to Trump's. Biden's plan calls for borrowers who earn less than $25,000 annually to pay no interest on their federal student loans, nor will they owe any payments. You will owe nothing, and you will accrue no interest if you earn less than $25,000 a year. Biden would cap total payments on federal student loans at 5% of discretionary income for borrowers who earn more than $25,000 a year. That means if you earn more than $25,000 a year, you take out food costs, you take out housing costs, you take out taxes, and you take out transportation costs. What is left, divide that by 20. 1/20th of your income after all of your necessity costs and all of your taxes. 1/20th of the remaining amount is the maximum you will owe in student debt payments per year. And as long as you have made payments on time for 20 years running, you will automatically have all of your student debt forgiven. I do not like this. This is the worst part of his plan. This is really, really, really stupid. This should be after 20 years of, maybe on-time payments includes late fees, maybe? I'm not sure. I don't think it necessarily does, so this feels like a really big asterisk. But overall, this means that if you make payments on time, so if you make $25,000 or less, you're not going to make payments for 20 years running. If you make $25,000 a year, your student debt just gets canceled. Automatic student loan forgiveness. Okay? For 20 years, you're going to pay 1/20th of your non-necessity income after you're done feeding, sending your kids to school, paying for their lunch, buying them clothes, putting a roof over your head, putting clothes on your back, getting transportation for everyone in your family to everywhere they need to go. Whatever you have left, 1/20th of that is the maximum you will owe on your student debt. What this should be is after 20 years of full payments. So even if you miss a payment, as long as you make the payment, you make the late fee, and you pay the late fee, this counts. So try and make your payments on time. I don't think this is fair, okay? I would hope that making a payment plus a late fee would retroactively count whatever payment you missed toward your 20 years, but I have no reason to believe that. I hope it's true. To summarize, Biden's student debt relief plan, if you make less than $25,000 a year, you will not make payments on your student debt. If you make over $25,000 a year, after taking all living costs and taxes out of the equation of your income, whatever is left is your discretionary income. 5% of that is the maximum amount that you will pay on your student loans every year. 5%. That is a manageable cost, I would say, for anyone making over $25,000 a year. I don't think you should have to make it, but I have ethical issues with the concept of student loans, and I think that federal student loans or private institutions getting you to take out student loans is inherently predatory, and those institutions should have to get that money back. But this turns student loans into something that is very affordable to pay off and is forgiven for whom it is not affordable. After 20 years of on-time payments, you will have 100% of your student loans forgiven. So at the end of the day, the majority of people are going to have their debt forgiven. All right? The biggest thing to criticize about Biden's plan is that it continues to punish people for missing loan payments in a way that really shouldn't be done. I think that a late fee, honestly, like, of course I have ethical problems with student loans and that kind of supersedes all of this talk, but if you take out a loan and you miss payments on it, you should have to pay a late fee. Of course you should. Like, you should be penalized for not making payments on your loans. Otherwise, people aren't going to lend you money. And I'm totally fine with that in a vacuum. But that should be the penalty. The late fee is the penalty, and probably a slightly worsening of your credit, though, you know, home ownership is going to go down in the next decades. So I don't have a problem with late fees, but that should be it. Don't count it against, like, don't use it to reset your 20 years of on-time payments. That's my criticism. That's my criticism of Joe Biden's plan, is it shouldn't be on-time payments. It should be completed payments. So as long as you make up that balance and you pay the late fee, your time continues. It retroactively applies that month that you missed toward your 20 years. Because everything else, actually, materially, it's really good. To cap debt payments at 5% of discretionary income makes it very manageable for families. So, of course, it's a good plan. It is a very good plan. It's going to make the lives of everybody with student debt so much easier. It's a really good plan. We didn't get everything of what we wanted, of course. And trust me, I care more about foreign policy than your average lefty. No one has more of a reason to hate Joe Biden than I do. As someone who viciously opposes the Hindu right and Hindu nationalism, who viciously opposes Hindu fascism, and engaged in an active protest against the fact that he employed a Hindu nationalist as his director of Asian outreach. That is infuriating to me. And that person was not required to disavow the Hindu right to continue serving on the Biden campaign. He was removed as director of API, put in a different senior position with slightly less public exposure, but there was no truth and reconciliation around the fact that there was a Hindutvite in Biden's campaign. He is still there. Of course that pisses me off. But the follow-up question to that is Biden worse than the Democratic Party standard? No. He's no worse. He's probably not better on global politics than anybody else in the Democratic Party, generally speaking. Maybe Warren is a little better, a little bit, marginally. The only person who is better on global politics is Bernie. I will grant in a total vacuum that Tulsi Gabbard is better than Joe Biden on ending reckless wars. But then she is also largely a win for the global right in the sense that she does kowtow to Hindu nationalists. So her brand of protectionism is more akin to Trump's protectionism than my own. I'm not going to vote for Tulsi Gabbard to end wars any more than I'm going to vote for Trump to end wars. The only serious progressive on foreign policy was Bernie Sanders. He lost. Biden is not worse than the Democratic standard, so I see no reason to vote against him because of it, especially when he represents a serious material benefit to marginalized communities all over the U.S. If you're a working class or belong to any marginalized community, literally any marginalized community in the U.S., you stand to gain from a Biden presidency. Even if it's through averting a disaster like a 7-2 Supreme Court with a fascist like Naomi Rao on it. I can't believe the left worked this hard, pushing Bernie during the primary, gaining him a lead in the polls, and getting Biden to basically highlight his most progressive policies at the center of his platform, probably as a result, just so that the left could decide all of the leverage that we have gained through the process of campaigning against Biden, we are just going to piss it away because we didn't get the candidate that we wanted. That blows my mind, that we're willing to shoot ourselves in the foot like that. And we have laid out the material gains from every single one of his policies, inadequate as each one may be in my book to varying degrees. There are benefits to electing Biden. It is movement forward. He's a conservative on foreign policy. I don't defend him there. And, on racial justice, I don't judge people who are affected by the prison industrial complex for saying, I'm not going to vote for him. But that's not the argument that white lefties are making. They're using that. White lefties use that argument as cover to protect their desire not to vote for a candidate they don't like. Get over it. Marginalized people have been doing it for decades. Just get over it. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video and want to see future content, the best thing that you can do to support the channel is to click that like button and subscribe for future videos. We're going to be covering all sorts of topics like the election. We're going to be talking about healthcare, the global far right, Hindu nationalism, and other topics to come as well. And if you'd like to join the conversation live, I stream to Twitch every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So come join the discussion there. Otherwise, stay tuned for future videos. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.